Start this trick with your front foot perpendicular to the board and covering the rearmost bolts on the front truck. Hang your toes over slightly because you're going to want your weight slightly towards the toe side of the board for reasons I'll get into in a second. Your back foot wants to be pointed at about a 30-degree angle just behind the back truck, and only the toes of the board are on the very edge of the deck here. The clue's in the name, folks. This is a toe flip. If you're any further in, this isn't going to work. Literally, just the big toe is on that point there. I learned these in the early 2000s on street boards, actually. On those, these are a little bit easier to get a feel for. They're not easier to do, but you can kind of understand them a bit more because there's a pocket. Where the concave ends and where the kicktail begins, there's a little gap, a little place where you can nestle your foot, and that is the sweet spot. Obviously, I don't have concave anymore. It really doesn't matter. The concave is totally useless on this anyway. And the pocket is still in exactly the same place. You're aiming for the gap between the upward sweep of the kicktail and the back wheel. If you imagine a little circle here, that's where all of the pressure has to go. Providing you follow my instructions on the foot placement, the rest of the trick's actually quite simple. This is the easiest of all the pressure flips. And that's how you've got to think about it. Just like the classic pressure flip, the one that most people know, this one basically just involves lifting the front foot clean up, straight upwards. If that drags across the grip tape in any direction, this is going to go wrong. Lift that straight up, and then the back foot does all of the work. Providing it's in that sweet spot, all you've got to do is push it down and across that way. Kind of drive it in a slightly circular or slightly diagonal motion. So you're going to start the board tipping like that and pull. Providing you can do that standing off the board, you should be able to do this rolling. It really is that simple. So again, find that sweet spot, figure it out, get the foot in just the right place, and then just hammer it down and across as hard as you can. Magic. But it's not always going to work that cleanly, so it's time to start looking at what can go wrong and how you can correct that. I think the biggest problem that most people are going to have with these is getting enough rotation. Getting a full 180 can be quite difficult. The flip, in comparison, surprisingly easy. You know, providing your board's set up correctly, but we'll get to that in a second. But getting the rotation, really there's two major hurdles there. First of all is that this back foot really has to drive across. I think some people will try kicking straight back or straight down, and all that will happen is the board will tumble a little. You might get a lot of flip, but you're not going to get the spin. So you've got to make sure this back foot is going to drive hard up this way. This is especially important if you are going to do these stationary. Rolling that forward momentum is going to help you with this. But stationary, you really have to make sure you hammer that around as hard as you can. Your next problem will be foot placement. If your foot is too far back, this is almost going to pop. Like if I'm right back on the tail here, oh wow, I've actually never done it like that. That feels really strange. You're going to get maybe too much spin, but you're not going to get the right leverage on it. But if your back foot is too far in, if it's perhaps directly over the wheel, then all of a sudden you're not going to get enough rotation. You get loads of flip, no spin. So finding that pocket, finding that sweet spot that I outlined, that will fix almost all of your rotational problems pretty much straight away. If the problem that you're having is you're not getting enough flip, there's about a 90% chance that the reason for that is actually your board setup. Now you can toe flip pretty much any board. I mean, you know, you're going to struggle on a huge long board, but in theory, a toe flip should work on anything. The catch is that the looser your trucks are, the harder this becomes. Now, my trucks are fairly loose by freestyle standards. They actually will turn and carve. So I've had to modify the technique slightly. Whereas on a rock-solid 80s setup, this is the easiest thing in the world. If your back truck doesn't want to lean, if it doesn't turn at all, then the second you put any pressure on that heel side edge, this wheel will lift. It won't take anything and the board will just come up. Once it gets to that point, it's going to want to flip and you can just drive through. But if you've got some movement in your truck, you've got to find a way of making it break through that point, of stopping the truck just leaning. So the key actually is not really in the back foot, it's in the front foot. And that's why I hang my toes over on the front foot. That puts the ball of my foot to the toe side of the truck bolts. That has two effects. First of all, it means that when I'm rolling, I can keep the board straight, because if that was still central, I'd just always be turning left. But also it means I can preload this flip in much the same way we do with a spin. You know, you take your buddy in the opposite direction and then throw everything, and gives you way more energy than if you just go from here. We can basically do the same with this toe flip. If I push down on the front foot and keep all my weight there, then it doesn't matter how much weight I put on the back end, it's not going to flip. I can load into it, I can really press in, and the board's not going to go. But as soon as I lift that front foot, all of that weight is unleashed. And I get a lot more power than if I wasn't preloading it. The looser your trucks are, the more important that is. But still, it's probably worth tightening your trucks up a bit. Just a good general rule, not even for toe flips, just tighten your trucks, seriously. Another important thing to note is that while these can be done stationary, they're not really that demanding, and you can just get on a board and, you know, flick it around. As a general rule, and this is true for basically anything that involves any sort of rotation, I think they're much easier to do and much easier to do cleanly when you're rolling. And that's because momentum is your friend, as always. You're taking that forwards momentum and you're transferring that. You're using that in your favor to get the rotation. And it should also keep it beneath you much easier. So if you're struggling with these stationary, find a decent amount of space. Don't go at it too fast. Just a little bit of pace will help you keep this under you and make it much cleaner in the long run. One last note. If you ever want to do this rolling, and you definitely should, pay attention to your shoulders. Watch what I'm doing as I roll towards the camera for this one. I'm going to start with my shoulders in line with the deck. And even though I open up, I kind of swing through this way, mid-trick. Starting like this gives me the push that I need to make this work. I can't imagine for any reason that you'd want to start this kind of opened up already. You know, the fact your front foot is totally perpendicular to the board basically guarantees you've got to be like this. But if for some reason this feels uncomfortable to you, just have a look at your shoulders, because they're usually the key when things don't feel right. So lazy. So there you go, toe flips. They're a fun little trick. They're not that hard, and I think that's something that a lot of people overlook. The only real criticism is that they are worm burners. They are always going to scuttle across the floor, and there's not really anything you can do to avoid that. It's just the nature of the trick. But that said, they still feel smooth. They're still something you can just do rolling down the street, and if you're willing to play around with them, there's a lot you can do. There's a couple of variations that I did many years ago that I still quite enjoy when I do them from time to time, but I highly recommend that you go away and you look at Yuzuki Kawasaki, because he has taken this trick and he has run with it way more than anyone else has, and some of his variations are just, they're beautiful. So yeah, there is a lot to do with this trick. There's a lot of life in it. Go out, have fun, enjoy it. Just go skate. Stop watching YouTube. YouTube's crap. This is all terrible. Just go skate. It's way better.